The stars looked cold and distant as Ambassador Ra stood before the communication array on Zephyr Prime. Her blue skin had lost its usual bright glow, and her 4 eyes showed the weight of terrible news. The Void Hunters were coming, and there was nowhere left to run. Ra touched the controls with her thin fingers. The machine hummed to life, ready to send her message across the galaxy. She had practiced these words 100 times, but they still felt heavy in her throat. "This is Ambassador Ra of the Confederation," she began. Her voice carried across space toward distant worlds. "We are a peaceful alliance of trading species. For 300 years, we have lived in harmony with our neighbors. We have never sought war or conquest." She paused, watching the status lights blink green. The message was reaching further and further into space, carrying her people's desperate hope. "The Void Hunters have entered our territory," she continued. "They have already consumed 17 of our worlds. Our defense fleets cannot stop them. We estimate 3 weeks before they reach our core systems. We request immediate assistance from any civilized species willing to help." Ra's voice broke slightly. "We cannot offer much payment. Our resources are limited, but we ask for whatever aid you can spare. Even a few ships would give us hope. Please, if anyone receives this message, remember that today it is us. Tomorrow it might be you." The transmission ended. Now came the hardest part: waiting. The first responses came quickly, but they were not encouraging. The Empire sent a single message: "Regrettable situation. Cannot spare forces at this time." The Stellar Federation was even shorter: "No ships available." 3 days passed before anyone offered real help. The Republic promised to send 5 patrol ships and medical supplies. The Dendron Collective offered 2 cargo vessels filled with emergency food. The Independent Worlds Alliance would send 3 destroyers, but they would take 2 weeks to arrive. Ra felt grateful for these offers, but the math was simple. The Void Hunters traveled with thousands of ships. They had weapons that could crack planets. 5 patrol ships and some food would not be enough. On the 4th day, something strange happened. A new signal reached Zephyr Prime, but it came from a part of space that most civilized species avoided: the Galactic Rim, where primitive worlds struggled to understand basic hyperspace travel. The signal was rough and filled with static. The translation systems had trouble making sense of it. The message seemed to say, "We got your call about raiders. Sounds like a good training exercise. We are coming to help." Ra read the message 3 times. Raiders, training exercise. Did these beings not understand the danger they were facing? The Void Hunters were not simple pirates. They were world eaters, a plague that had destroyed entire civilizations. She tried to send a reply, explaining the true nature of the threat, but the signal had come from so far away that any response would take days to reach them. Whoever these people were, they were already on their way. Meanwhile, in the human colony of New Geneva, Captain Sarah stood in the command center reading reports. The translation of the alien message was poor, but the basic meaning seemed clear. Some trading confederation was having trouble with raiders and wanted help. "What do you think, Commander?" she asked her second-in-command. Commander looked at the star charts. "It's in our patrol sector, technically, and we've been looking for a chance to test the new fleet formations." Sarah nodded. The human colonial defense force had spent years building up their strength. They had united the Earth fleets with the colonial militias, creating the largest human military force in history. But they had never fought alongside each other in a real battle. "The politicians have been asking when we'll be ready for actual operations," Sarah said. "Maybe this is our chance to prove ourselves." She walked to the communication station. "Send a message to Admiral on the Terra's Fury. Tell him we have a training opportunity. A friendly trading alliance is having trouble with some raiders and requested assistance." "Should we ask how many ships they want us to send?" the communications officer asked. Sarah thought about it. The message had been unclear about the size of the threat. If they sent too few ships, they might not be able to help effectively. If they sent too many, they would waste resources. Better to be prepared, she decided. Tell the Admiral we recommend a full response. If we're going to do this, we should do it right. The communications officer looked surprised. The full expeditionary fleet, for raiders. The message said they were desperate, Sarah explained. And we don't know what we're flying into. Our policy has always been to go in strong or not at all. Within hours, the order went out across human space. Every available warship, support vessel, and transport was to gather at the staging point. The Earth Defense Fleet, the Colonial Guard, the Frontier Patrol, and the Deep Space Navy would work together for the first time. Admiral received the orders on his flagship while conducting routine patrols near Jupiter. He read the mission briefing twice, then called his staff together. "And ladies," he announced to his senior officers, "we have our first official mission as a unified human fleet. Some aliens are having trouble with raiders and asked for help." "How big is the raider force?" asked Captain of the heavy cruiser Vancouver. "Unknown," admitted. "The alien message was not clear, but Command has authorized a full deployment." The officers exchanged glances. A full deployment meant every ship they had. It seemed like a lot of firepower for simple raiders, but they trusted their orders. "When do we leave?" asked Commander Santos of the destroyer squadron. Checked his chronometer. "Fleet assembly begins in 6 hours. We launch in 18 hours. I want every ship ready for hyperspace transit." As the meeting broke up, stood alone on his bridge, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, aliens were in trouble and had asked for help. Humanity would not disappoint them. He did not know that those same aliens were expecting perhaps a dozen ships at most. He did not know that they faced an enemy with thousands of vessels. He did not know that his decision to deploy the entire human fleet would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. All knew was that someone had asked for help, and humanity would answer that call. Ra stood in the observation deck of Zephyr Station, watching the empty space beyond their world. The ships had arrived yesterday, 5 small patrol vessels that looked brave but impossibly tiny against the vast darkness. The Dendron cargo ships were still 2 days away. "Ambassador," called her aide from across the room, "we're detecting hyperspace signatures, multiple contacts incoming." Ra felt her heart lift slightly. Perhaps more help was arriving. Every ship counted now. "How many?" she asked. Checked his instruments. His expression changed from hope to confusion. "The readings must be wrong. The sensors show hundreds of ships." "Check the equipment," Ra said quickly. "There must be an error." But the sensors were working perfectly. Space around Zephyr Prime began to tear open as ship after ship emerged from hyperspace. The first vessels to appear were massive, larger than anything in the fleet. They had angular hulls covered in weapons and armor plating that spoke of a species that expected to fight. Then more ships appeared, and more. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support vessels filled the space around their world. The largest ship of all emerged last, a floating city of metal and guns that dwarfed even their biggest space station. "By the ancient stars," whispered, "there are hundreds of them." Ra could only stare. The human fleet for these had to be the humans who had responded to their call, stretched across space like a metal constellation. She counted over 800 ships of various sizes, all bearing the same angular design and heavy weaponry. On the bridge of the UHCV Terra's Fury, Admiral looked at the tactical displays with satisfaction. The fleet had made the hyperspace jump without any problems. All 847 ships had arrived on schedule and in formation. "Impressive world," commented Captain Park, his chief of staff. "Good orbital infrastructure for such a remote location." Nodded, studying the data streaming in from their sensors. The Confederation had built a peaceful civilization focused on trade and diplomacy. Their ships were beautiful but lightly armed. Their stations were designed for commerce, not war. "Sir," called communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. They're requesting to speak with our commanding officer." "Put them through," ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing Ambassador Ra. The alien looked shocked and overwhelmed, could see space traffic controllers and other officials moving frantically in the background. "Honored humans," Ra began, her voice shaking slightly. "We are grateful beyond words that you answered our call for help, but I fear there has been some misunderstanding." Frowned. "What kind of misunderstanding, Ambassador?" "We requested assistance with raiders, what you might call pirates or bandits. We expected perhaps a squadron of ships, maybe a few dozen at most. We cannot possibly afford to pay for a fleet of this magnitude." The admiral looked around his bridge. His officers were listening to every word, realized the situation was more complex than their intelligence had suggested. "How serious is this raider threat?" he asked. Ra's expression grew dark. "They are not simple raiders. They call themselves the Void Hunters. They have destroyed 17 of our worlds already. They travel with thousands of ships and weapons that can crack planets. We face complete extinction." Felt the mood on his bridge change. This was not the training exercise they had expected. This was a real war against an enemy that vastly outnumbered them. "Ambassador," said carefully, "exactly how many ships do these Void Hunters have?" "Our scouts reported over 3,000 vessels in their main fleet," Ra replied. "They have been growing stronger with each world they consume. No single species has ever been able to stop them." Captain Park stepped closer to, "Sir, we have 800 ships, they have 3,000, the math is not in our favor." Studied the tactical projections. On paper, this looked like a losing battle. The smart move would be to withdraw immediately before the Void Hunters arrived. No one would blame humanity for refusing such impossible odds. But thought about the desperate message they had received. These peaceful beings had asked for help, and humanity had answered. Leaving now would mean abandoning them to certain death. "Sir," said Commander Santos from the destroyer squadron, "maybe we should reconsider. This is not what we signed up for." Looked at the faces of his officers. Some showed fear, others determination. All were waiting for his decision. "You're right, Commander," said slowly. "This is not what we signed up for. We came here expecting to deal with a few pirates. Instead, we find an entire civilization facing extinction." He turned back to the screen, where Ra was waiting anxiously. "Ambassador, we understand the situation now. These are not raiders. They are an existential threat to your people and potentially to others in this region of space." "Yes," Ra said. "We should have been clearer in our message. We understand if your people wish to withdraw. We cannot ask you to face such overwhelming odds for strangers." Was quiet for a long moment. He thought about human history, about all the times his species had faced impossible odds and kept fighting anyway. He thought about the families on the worlds, probably looking up at the sky and hopping for salvation. "Ambassador," said finally, "humanity has a saying, we don't leave people behind." Ra looked confused. "I don't understand." "We're here now," explained. "We came to help and that's what we're going to do. Let's finish what we started." "But the odds," Ra began. "The odds don't matter," interrupted. "What matters is that innocent people are in danger and we have the power to help them. That makes it our responsibility." On the bridge, officers straightened. They might be outnumbered, but they were not in terms of determination. "Sir," Captain Park said, "what are your orders?" Turned to his tactical officer. "Begin long-range reconnaissance. I want to know everything about these Void Hunters, their ship classes, their tactics, their weaknesses. We're going to study them like a science project." "And then?" asked Santos. Smiled grimly. "Then we're going to show them why humanity doesn't back down from a fight. Signal all ships we are committing to this operation. full defensive preparations. On Zephyr Prime, Ra ended the transmission and sat down heavily. She had called for help and received it beyond her wildest dreams. But she wondered if she had just sentenced these brave humans to death alongside her own people. The Void Hunters were coming, and now humanity would face them too. The Void Hunters arrived like a plague of metal locusts. Their ships poured out of hyperspace in waves, blotting out the stars around Zephyr Prime. Dark vessels with organic curves and hungry-looking weapon ports spread across space like a disease. War Leader stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Devourer of Worlds. He had led the Void Hunters for 50 years, consuming hundreds of planets. This would be another easy victory. "Status report," he growled to his navigation officer. 3,047 ships operational, all hunter packs in position. The prey world is surrounded. Smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Any defending forces?" "Yes, War Leader. Approximately 800 vessels. Unknown configuration. They appear to be protecting the trading ships." 800 ships. Had expected maybe 50 at most. Usually, the prey species allies would send a token force and then retreat when they saw the true size of the hunter fleet. But 800 ships suggested someone was taking this seriously. "Interesting," mused. "Who are these defenders?" "Unknown species, War Leader. Our databases have no record of their ship designs." Studied the tactical display. The unknown ships had formed a defensive perimeter around Zephyr Prime. Their formation was tight and professional. These were not pirates or traders playing at war. These were real soldiers. "Open a communication channel to their fleet," ordered. "Let me speak to their leader." On the Terra's Fury, Admiral received the incoming transmission. The alien that appeared on his screen looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares, all teeth and claws and hungry eyes. "I am War Leader of the Void Hunters," the creature announced. "You defend prey that belongs to us. Withdraw now and we will let you live." Looked around his bridge. His officers were ready for battle. Their faces showed determination instead of fear. "I am Admiral of the Human Colonial Defense Force," replied. "These people asked for our help and we gave them our word. We don't break our promises." Laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "You have 800 ships. We have 3,000. Simple mathematics says you should surrender." "Mathematics," said calmly, "assumes both sides follow the same rules." Before could respond, cut the transmission. He turned to his communications officer. "Signal all ships execute Battle Plan Alpha. Let's show them how humans fight." The first wave of Void Hunter ships rushed forward, expecting the defenders to fall back toward the planet. Instead, the human fleet split into smaller groups and charged straight at the attackers. Captain Maria Santos led the destroyer squadron into the heart of the enemy formation. Her ship, the UA-10 Barcelona, launched a cloud of small objects that the Void Hunter's sensors couldn't identify. "What are those things?" asked Tactical Officer. "Unknown, War Leader. Too small to be missiles, too many to be fighters." The small objects were kamikaze drones, a human invention that other species considered barbaric. Each drone carried enough explosives to cripple a cruiser. They swarmed toward the Void Hunter ships like angry insects. "Shoot them down," ordered. But there were too many drones and they moved in unpredictable patterns. When the first drone hit a Void Hunter destroyer, the explosion lit up space. Then another hit, and another. Within minutes, 12 Hunter ships were dead or crippled. "Impossible," snarled. "No civilized species uses suicide weapons." He was about to learn that humans had their own definition of civilized. The Barcelona opened fire with its main guns. But instead of energy beams like most species used, it fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The kinetic rounds punched through Void Hunter energy shields like they weren't there, tearing holes in ship hulls. "Their weapons ignore our shields," reported a hunter captain. "How is that possible?" Maria Santos smiled grimly as she watched enemy ships explode. "All stations, this is Santos. Open a channel to all frequencies." Her voice rang out across space, reaching every ship in both fleets. "Attention Void Hunters, you wanted to hunt. Welcome to Earth's hunting season. Today you're the prey." The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves. Where other species fought with honor and restraint, humans fought like their survival depended on it. Because to them, it did. The heavy cruiser Vancouver targeted a Void Hunter battleship with its experimental weapons. Instead of trying to disable the enemy vessel, it fired a gravity torpedo, a weapon that created a tiny black hole inside the target ship. The Hunter battleship simply collapsed in on itself. "By the dark stars," whispered, "what kind of monsters are these?" On Zephyr Prime, Ambassador Ra watched the battle from the space station's command center. She had seen many conflicts between civilized species. They followed rules: no targeting civilian areas, no pursuit of retreating enemies, no destruction beyond what was necessary for victory. The humans followed no such rules. When a group of Void Hunter ships tried to retreat, human fighters pursued them relentlessly. When Hunter commanders tried to surrender, the humans ignored them and kept firing. When a Hunter ship used a civilian transport as a shield, a human destroyer simply shot through both vessels. "By the ancient stars," breathed, "they fight like animals." Ra watched a human ship ram itself into a Void Hunter carrier, both vessels exploding in a ball of fire. The human captain had sacrificed his entire crew to take down an enemy ship. "No," she said quietly. "Animals fight for food or territory. Humans fight like they want to remove their enemies from existence entirely." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Void Hunters had superior numbers, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Every human ship fought until it was destroyed. Every human captain treated their mission as more important than their own life. When the UHN Delhi was surrounded by 5 Hunter ships, its captain didn't try to escape. Instead, he overloaded his ship's reactor and turned his vessel into a bomb. The explosion took out 3 enemy ships. When the destroyer Munich lost its main engines, its crew used emergency thrusters to slowly drift toward a Hunter battleship. They rammed their damaged vessel into the enemy's bridge, killing both crews but saving dozens of Allied ships. Watched his forces being torn apart by an enemy that refused to fight like civilized beings. The humans used weapons that destroyed everything: ships, space stations, even small moons that got in the way. "War leader," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost over 600 ships. Enemy casualties are approximately 200 vessels." "Those numbers are impossible," growled. "We outnumber them 3-1. "Yes, war leader, but they fight differently than any species we've encountered. They don't seem to care about casualties as long as they inflict more damage than they receive." Realized with growing horror that he was losing. These humans fought wars like they were solving math problems, willing to accept any cost as long as the final equation ended with their enemies dead. Admiral stood on his bridge, watching the tactical displays. The human fleet was taking heavy losses, but they were winning. Each Void Hunter ship destroyed was one less threat to innocent people. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "enemy fleet is beginning to withdraw. They're trying to escape to hyperspace." His expression didn't change. "Signal all ships, no survivors, no retreats, hunt them down." The human fleet pursued the fleeing Void Hunters like sharks following blood in the water. This was no longer just a battle, it was an extermination. The battle around Zephyr Prime ended after 18 hours. The space around the planet was filled with debris from destroyed Void Hunter ships. Of the 3,000 vessels that had attacked, only 400 managed to escape into hyperspace. Ambassador Ra expected the human fleet to celebrate their victory and prepare to return home. Instead, she watched in growing amazement as they began hunting the survivors. Admiral stood in his command center, studying star charts that showed Void Hunter movements across the sector. His intelligence officers had been working through the night, analyzing captured data from destroyed enemy ships. Reports ordered. Commander stepped forward with a data tablet. We've identified 17 Void Hunter bases across 3 star systems, supply depots, shipyards, breeding worlds, and command centers. The survivors from today's battle are fleeing toward these locations. Population estimates asked. Approximately 40 million Void Hunters total, spread across their territory. Military and civilian population mixed together on most worlds. Studied the numbers. By the standards of most galactic species, this would be where the war ended. The immediate threat was gone. Negotiating a peace treaty would be the civilized thing to do. But had read the reports about the 17 worlds the Void Hunters had consumed. Billions of innocent people had died. Children, families, entire civilizations wiped out to feed Hunter expansion. Commander said quietly, "Implement terminal protocol." Looked shocked. "Sir, are you certain terminal protocol means?" "I know what it means," interrupted. "Total elimination of enemy capability. No bases, no ships, no infrastructure. Nothing left that could threaten innocent people ever again." Ra received the news when Captain Santos contacted Zephyr Station. "Ambassador," Santos said over the communication link, "we need to discuss our next phase of operations." "Next phase?" Ra asked. "The battle is over. The Void Hunters have been defeated." "The immediate threat has been neutralized," Santos corrected. "But we've confirmed that Void Hunter survivors are regrouping at bases throughout this sector. If we leave now, they'll return in a few years, stronger and more dangerous." Ra felt a chill run through her. "What are you suggesting?" "Complete elimination of Void Hunter military capability. We're going to hunt down every base, every ship, every weapon they have. When we're finished, they won't be able to threaten anyone ever again." The idea was staggering. Most galactic wars ended with peace treaties and negotiated settlements. The concept of completely destroying an enemy civilization was something from ancient history. "Captain," Ra said carefully, "surely there must be civilian populations on those worlds, non-combatants. Perhaps the Void Hunters could be convinced to change their ways." Santos was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was hard. "Ambassador, we've analyzed Void Hunter biology and culture. They don't have civilians in the way we understand the term. Every adult is either a warrior or supports the war effort. Their entire civilization exists to consume other species." She paused, then continued. "We've also examined what they did to your 17 worlds. They didn't just conquer them, they stripped them bare. Every resource, every living thing, everything consumed to feed their expansion. The humans they captured weren't prisoners of war. They were food." Ra closed her eyes. She had tried not to think too hard about what had happened to the billions of who had lived on those lost worlds. "So what you're proposing is," she began. "Extinction," Santos said bluntly. "The Void Hunters as a species represent a permanent threat to galactic civilization. The only way to protect innocent people is to make sure they can never threaten anyone again." The human fleet split into 7 task forces, each targeting multiple Void Hunter strongholds. They moved through space like a force of nature, systematically destroying everything connected to their enemy. Task Force Alpha, led by Admiral himself, hit the primary Void Hunter shipyards in the system. The facilities were defended by 200 ships and orbital defense platforms that could have held off most fleets. The humans didn't try to capture the shipyards. They destroyed them completely, along with every ship under construction and every worker inside them. When they finished, the system was empty except for cooling metal and expanding gas clouds. Task Force Beta found a Void Hunter breeding world where young hunters were raised and trained for warfare. Captain of the Vancouver studied the intelligence reports with growing disgust. "They don't have schools," he reported to Admiral. "They have training camps. Every child is taught to kill and consume other species from the moment they can walk." Recommendations, asked over the communication link. Looked at his crew. They were good people who had joined the military to protect innocent lives. What he was about to suggest went against every instinct of mercy they had been taught. But then he thought about the children who had died on 17 worlds. Children who had been hunted and consumed by creatures trained from birth to see them as food. Surface bombardment said, complete sterilization of the planet, no survivors. It was done in 6 hours. Task Force Beta's ships fired from orbit until nothing moved on the surface below. The breeding world that had produced generations of killers was reduced to ash and silence. Task Force Gamma discovered something that chilled even the hardened human soldiers. Hidden deep in an asteroid field, they found Void Hunter storage facilities filled with preserved body parts from dozens of species. Trophies taken from conquered worlds, kept as reminders of successful hunts. When Captain of the destroyer Phoenix saw the contents of those storage facilities, he didn't bother requesting orders. His ships reduced the entire asteroid field to dust. "Some things," he reported to Admiral afterward, "don't deserve to exist." The campaign continued for exactly 72 hours. Human task forces moved through Void Hunter space like death itself, destroying everything they found. Ships, bases, mining operations, communication relays, supply depots, nothing was spared. The few Void Hunter survivors who tried to surrender were ignored. The humans had decided that this species was too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. On Zephyr Prime, Ambassador Ra watched the progress reports with growing awe and horror. The humans were systematically erasing an entire civilization from existence. No galactic species had ever attempted anything so thorough. "Ambassador," said quietly, "perhaps we should ask them to stop. Surely enough damage has been done." Ra thought about the 17 worlds. Billions of her people had died screaming in Void Hunter feeding chambers. Entire planets had been stripped bare and left as dead rocks floating in space. "No," she said finally. "The humans are right. Some threats are too dangerous to leave alive." By the end of the 3rd day, Void Hunter space was silent. Every base had been destroyed. Every ship had been hunted down and eliminated. The asteroid mining operations that had supported their expansion were gone. Even their communication networks had been systematically targeted and destroyed. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Terra's Fury, reading the final casualty reports. The Void Hunters as a military force had ceased to exist. As a species, fewer than 100 individuals remained scattered across the galaxy, too few to ever rebuild their civilization. "Sir," Commander said quietly, "terminal protocol is complete. Enemy capability has been reduced to 0. Nodded, signal all task forces to return to Zephyr Prime. Mission accomplished. As the human fleet reassembled around the word of what had happened began to spread across the galaxy. The Void Hunters who had terrorized civilized space for centuries were gone. Not defeated, not conquered, completely erased from existence. Other species began to ask uncomfortable questions. If humans were willing to exterminate one enemy so thoroughly, what would they do to others who crossed them? The age of limited warfare and negotiated peace was ending. Humanity had arrived in galactic politics, and they had brought their own rules with them. 3 weeks after the last Void Hunter ship was destroyed, Ambassador Ra found herself in an impossible situation. The Confederation had been saved, but now they faced a new problem: what to do about their saviors. She stood in the main hall of Zephyr Station, preparing to sign the most important document in her species' history. The Human Protectorate Agreement would make the Confederation humanity's first official ally. It would guarantee their protection and open trade between their civilizations. It would also mean accepting that humanity now had a permanent presence in their space. Admiral sat across from her at the negotiation table. His expression was calm and professional, but Ra had learned to read human faces over the past weeks. She saw the weight of command in his eyes, the burden of decisions that had erased an entire species from existence. "Are you certain about this, Ambassador?" asked quietly. "Once we sign this agreement, humanity will consider any threat to your people as a threat to us. That's a responsibility we take seriously." Ra thought about the alternative. Without human protection, the Confederation would be vulnerable to every predator species in the galaxy. Word of their weakness had already spread. Pirates and raiders were beginning to test their borders. But with human protection came human standards of dealing with threats. "We understand," she said finally. "Your methods are different from what we're used to, but you saved us when no one else would." Nodded and signed the document. Ra added her signature below his. The agreement was now binding under both human and law. "Welcome to the Human Protectorate," said. "I hope we can build something good together." As news of the alliance spread across the galaxy, other species began to react. The responses varied dramatically depending on each civilization's relationship with their neighbors. The Empire, which had refused to help suddenly found themselves reconsidering their foreign policy. Their ambassador sent an urgent message to human space. "The Empire wishes to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. We believe our species share many values and could benefit from closer cooperation." The message was politely but firmly declined. Humanity, it seemed, remembered who had helped and who had stood aside. The Republic, which had sent 5 patrol ships to help received a very different response. Human trade delegations arrived within days, offering technology exchanges and mutual defense agreements. "Loyalty," Admiral explained to his staff, "is something humanity values above almost everything else. They kept their word when it mattered. Now we'll keep ours." But not every species was interested in friendship with humanity. The hegemony of a militaristic empire that had conquered 12 systems in the past century began preparing for conflict. "These humans are dangerous," declared War Marshal, or at an emergency session of the Hegemony Council. "They destroy entire civilizations without negotiation. If we don't stop them now, we'll be next." The hegemony began building up their fleets and fortifying their borders. They sent messages to other military powers, trying to organize a coalition against the human threat. Most species declined to join. The memory of 3,000 Void Hunter ships being reduced to scrap metal in 72 hours was still fresh in everyone's minds. On Earth, the human colonial defense force found itself dealing with unprecedented attention from the galactic community. Ambassador Sarah, humanity's newly appointed Director of Alien Relations, reviewed the daily intelligence briefings with growing amazement. 17 species have requested formal diplomatic contact, she reported to the Colonial Council. 23 others have increased military spending since news of the Void Hunter campaign spread, and the Traders Guild has offered us a permanent seat on their governing board. President Martinez leaned back in his chair. "How are our people handling all this attention?" "The fleet commanders are adapting well," replied. "Admiral has been particularly effective at establishing our reputation, but we need to decide on a formal policy for dealing with alien governments." "What does recommend?" Checked her notes. He's proposed something he calls the Human Protectorate Doctrine. Any species that asks for our help and proves worthy of our trust becomes our responsibility. Any species that threatens our protectorates becomes our enemy. And our enemies. His expression grew serious. Complete elimination of their ability to threaten innocent people, the same protocol used against the Void Hunters. President Martinez was quiet for a long moment, the room filled with the weight of what they were discussing. Humanity was establishing itself as a major power in the galaxy, but the foundation of that power was their willingness to do what other species considered unthinkable. "The galaxy needs to understand our position," Martinez said finally. "We're not conquerors, but we're not going to ignore threats to innocent people either." "Yes, sir. Admiral is preparing a formal statement to broadcast across known space." The statement was transmitted 3 days later. Every major civilization in the galaxy received Admiral's message simultaneously. "This is Admiral of the Human Colonial Defense Force, speaking on behalf of all human governments and military organizations. 3 weeks ago, the Confederation faced extinction at the hands of the Void Hunters. They asked for help. We provided it. Some of you have asked about our methods. Some have called them extreme. We understand your concerns, but we want to be clear about our position. Humanity believes that some threats cannot be negotiated with or reformed. Some problems require permanent solutions. When innocent people ask for our help against such threats, we will provide whatever force is necessary to ensure their safety. This is not a threat to peaceful civilizations. This is a promise to those who would prey on the innocent. The Confederation is now under human protection. Any species that harms them will face the same fate as the Void Hunters. This protection extends to any other civilization that asks for our help and proves worthy of our trust. We hope to build peaceful relationships with all civilized species, but understand that our definition of civilization includes treating innocent life as sacred. Those who cannot accept this principle will find humanity to be a very unforgiving enemy." The message ended with coordinates for human diplomatic missions and a formal invitation for peaceful contact. On Zephyr Prime, Ambassador Ra listened to the broadcast with mixed emotions. The humans had indeed saved her people, but they had also fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. "What have we done?" asked quietly. Ra watched human patrol ships moving through their system, protecting trade routes that had been plagued by pirates for decades. The pirates had fled after the first human destroyer had reduced 3 of their ships to atoms. "We called for help," she said, "and we got it." "But look what it cost," protested. "An entire species extinct, the galaxy reorganizing around human military power, species choosing sides based on fear of what humanity might do to them." Ra thought about the children on the 17 lost worlds. They had called for help too, but no one had answered their call. "The galaxy was already organized around military power," she said finally. "The strong took what they wanted from the weak, and everyone called it civilization. The Void Hunters were just the most honest about it." She gestured toward the human ships patrolling their space. "At least now, the strong are on the side of people who can't protect themselves." Months passed. The human protectorate grew as more species requested protection from aggressive neighbors. They were followed by the Peaceful Traders Coalition, the Democratic Worlds Alliance, and even some individual systems that had broken away from hostile empires. Each new member brought the same question: were humans really as dangerous as the stories suggested? The answer came when the hegemony of finally launched their preemptive strike against human space. They attacked with 600 ships, confident that they could cripple humanity before the human fleet could respond. The war lasted 11 days. When it ended, the hegemony of no longer existed. Their 12 conquered worlds were liberated and offered membership in the human protectorate. Their military leadership was dead. Their entire civilization had been reduced to scattered refugee groups fleeing toward distant systems. Admiral issued a brief statement afterward. "The hegemony chose violence against innocent people. We responded appropriately." The galaxy learned its lesson. Humanity didn't bluff. They didn't negotiate with species that threatened their protectorates. They didn't believe in proportional responses or limited warfare. When humans decided something was a problem, they solved it permanently. As Ra stood on her observation deck, watching human and children playing together in the station's recreation area, she reflected on how much had changed. Her people had asked for help against raiders, and humanity had arrived with their entire fleet. The translation error that had started it all now seemed like destiny. Perhaps the universe had known that half measures wouldn't be enough. The galaxy had a new protector now, one that believed some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost, one that would rather solve problems completely than leave them to fester and return stronger. It was a harsh kind of protection, but for species that had spent centuries living in fear, it was exactly what they needed. The age of limited warfare was over. The age of permanent solutions had begun.